All right. Hey, nice to meet everyone. Preeti, thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of walking you through, uh, through like a brief history of DeFi over just the last few years. And then I want to highlight, of course, like the landscape today, what it looks like, and then some things that I think are missing from it. So I'm going to try to like keep this as TLDR style as possible. Should be really easy then to consume. And my goal is to leave 15 minutes at the end if we want to just do some general sort of questions. Does that sound like a good plan though? Anyone have any questions before we get started? All good, Preeti? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me grab a few things here for you. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. I'm 35 and my identity is tied to my Twitter account, which is kind of scary since I'm a proponent of Web3 and I clearly don't own this. Okay. So I worked in like a very traditional software job about 4 or 5 years ago. I lived in the Bay Area. I had worked in a bunch of different startups, all of them promising me the world and none of them delivering shit. And so I got to like experience all of the startup life of the Bay Area. My background before that was chemistry. So at some point in my life, I thought I was going to be a chemist in a lab, and quickly realized that the problem solving and the learning and teaching was really what I loved and enjoyed. And then around 2017, oh, here's someone else. Augie, chill out. Sorry, that's my dog, if you can hear him in the background. So around 4 years ago, I went to an Ethereum conference, and I don't know like how far down the rabbit hole all of you are. Obviously you've committed yourselves to learning to be a developer, a future founder in Ethereum. But I mean, that was the first time I really got to interact with a community that was building in Ethereum. It was really early days. Obviously in 2017, there was a lot that was being pitched about the potential of what was going to be built on Ethereum. But long story short, I went to this conference and I came home babbling about all these different Web3 ideas and that everything was going to be built on Ethereum. And I went from not sure how to explain what a blockchain was to like, I absolutely have to find a way to work in this, because it seems like the best shot at impacting the most people's lives and building what I thought was like a fair society. And that started here with finance. So the reason I'm showing you this here on Twitter is around mid 2018, the crypto markets were in a lot of turmoil. Everything was seemingly going to go to zero suddenly, and I found myself just again more and more obsessed with trying to learn about what was being built. Recognizing that the bear market was an opportunity. So I ended up working at Consensus for a few years. I got to work across a bunch of different projects there, including like MetaMask. I got some exposure to working with teams like MetaMask and Gitcoin. And, at the time, of course, it was a very small group of believers in a future where open source software wins, built on Ethereum. So then in the summer of 2020, so 2 years later, I joined Zapper. I was the third employee at Zapper, and I worked there for the past year across basically everything that was needed, like marketing and operations and customer support, strategy, whatever. And then just more recently, I joined the team here at Fourth Revolution Capital. So if you enjoy today's presentation, you can thank my colleagues at Fourth Revolution for being very supportive of sort of mass education of DeFi and Web3. And if you do build a protocol in the future or launch an application or just, want a second set of eyes and ears to give feedback, we're looking for the next, great founder. And we're mainly focused on DeFi, NFTs, and what we believe is the start of a lasting metaverse built on blockchains, namely Ethereum today. So what I ended up doing the last few years, though, is I started posting on Twitter. So I realized there's so many people that are active on Twitter, and I started posting stuff like this. I mean, I still do it today, but I realized not enough people were using DeFi. This goes back to probably summer of 2019 when I started to use Compound and Maker. And I just realized very quickly that a lot of people just hadn't had the bravery to try it or put some money at risk. In my case, I was putting $10 or $20 of DAI at the time, and started to just try to create little tutorials of what I was doing, how it all worked. And I cannot emphasize enough that just putting yourself out there, whether it's building a protocol or whether it's trying to teach others about your own experience, in this wild west of building the future of Web3, you very quickly make lots of friends. And I sort of held to this ethos of, if I can have a positive impact on even a single person in a day in this space, if I can help someone to learn something once a day, there will be some incredible network effects that will come back to me as well. So I'd say all opportunities to date have really come from just wanting to help others in the community. All right, on that note, that's enough about me. And again, if you're looking for other projects that I've worked on more closely with, I'm an advisor to the Defiant. So if you're looking to keep up on general news and the day-to-day of DeFi, I'd highly recommend the defiant.io. There's also, I'm an advisor here to the Ethereum push notification service, probably one of the best new projects to highlight. It's been building for about a year, but they're about to launch to mainnet, and it is on-chain push notifications. So one of the things that we've been missing in DeFi is the ability to directly communicate with wallets. We're used to joining Discords and Telegrams and in rare cases, giving up an email to join an email list. The future is being able to actually talk to the wallets that have money, in your protocol, or to be able to reach out to a community, almost like a Telegram, that doesn't have to give up their identity, but can simply identify by their wallet address. So just want to re-highlight that one. Okay. All right. So let's talk my goal here is to get through this in 30 minutes. So we have time to talk through questions or sort of feedback on this. Okay. So the history of DeFi, I tried to summarize it here in a single slide, and forgive me, I've probably left out a number of major milestones and projects. So I'm going to try to break down the significance of these along the way, because this, I think, will help you to understand where we are in the growth trajectory of DeFi. So the most basic building block, of course, beyond Ethereum launching, I would still claim is Maker having launched in 2017. Let me go ahead and present this. So when Maker launches, it suddenly gives us a stable medium of exchange. Despite all of the mental gymnastics and bullshit that you hear, people talk about Bitcoin being used as a medium of exchange, that it's going to be very volatile forever, but then at some point it will no longer be and everyone will adopt it and love it. This was, to me, a real light bulb moment I was only a few months into my journey, and I was holding Bitcoin and Ether, still do today. And I get to this point and I'm like, holy cow, like a digital dollar. Like that's not just a convenience for me living in the United States. It's suddenly a life raft for friends that I had met across the world. One of which at the time was working at Maker and would go on to give lots of talks about the fact that he was living in Argentina, living off of DAI, being paid in DAI, and being able to circumvent the capital controls that he was living under in Argentina. So this today still, I think, it's one of those core building blocks that we tend to ignore, but stable coins are very important for us to, I think, be able to draw a parallel to the traditional finance world and to draw more people in who at least understand the concept of a dollar, except in this case, scarce and digital and native to Ethereum and now other blockchains as well. Another few quicker highlights here. So 2018 is a pretty brutal year. There's a lot of ICOs that revealed themselves and went defunct, and but there were many more, I think, that continued to build. And so I'm highlighting ETH here because I think it was one of the best wiki style information sources for Ethereum. The Ethereum Foundation's website was really, actually, I'm not sure if it existed when ETH launched, and then whatever did exist early was pretty ugly. We have Compound launching in September 2018. In December 2018, you have Synthetics. So, Synthetics launching really was ahead of its time. I mean, it was very experimental to have what were derivatives. Suddenly you could gain exposure to some real world assets or some foreign currencies that you otherwise didn't have access to, especially with our dependency on that digital dollar DAI. InstaDapp launches. This is another major development that we're now building tools that are native to Ethereum that are helping us to, in this case, manage maker loans. So this is, we're going back in time. We go from building Ethereum native applications that create some utility that mirrors what's in traditional finance, but within a year's time, we're already starting to see some early tools emerge that are built for that early adopter. Not for the person that we hope will join the masses of us using DeFi in the future. This to me is an early lesson around focusing on who is here and now and doubling down on that user. Moving forward, ETHLend, which was eventually Aave, launched in February 2019. Just interesting fact. Token Sets, which was almost like being able to buy into an ETF. Basically, it was a way to gain exposure to trading strategies that were automated on Ethereum with smart contracts. These were sort of radical things to launch after, again, living through this bear market up until now. 2020, though, is the big year for DeFi. 2020 is the year when we went from the summer and fall of 2019, where I would argue is probably maybe 1,000 users in DeFi, and we're screaming at our friends and family this is insane. I can earn 20% on Compound, or I can play Pool Together, which is a lossless lottery. I can play the lottery but not lose my money and earn the interest that's accruing through Compound, starting to understand what is composability at that time. And then what really explodes, so if we focus here, in 2020, there were two things for me that I think are major inflection points for the DeFi community. One is when the Ren Bridge launches. And by the way, I will disclose along the way if I hold any of these tokens. I do hold SNX. I skipped this one here. Curve launched in February 2020, but I don't hold a red. Just calling these things out in case I have any bias to retell history the way I'd like to see it. So the spring, May 2020, suddenly you can permissionlessly move your Bitcoin from the Bitcoin blockchain to Ethereum. You no longer have to go through any sort of custodial service. In the past, you had to go through like an exchange, or there were wrapped Bitcoin exchanges that would allow you to swap Bitcoin for wrapped Bitcoin. But this opened up the door for me to not have to speak with anyone, go through any sort of middleman, and suddenly I could move Bitcoin onto Ethereum. And I think, like, skipping ahead here, we moved from, there was around 1,100 Bitcoin tokenized at the start of 2020. And by September, there was 10 billion. Oh, I'm sorry. There was 1 billion Bitcoin that had been tokenized. So, I mean, the numbers were outrageous. Like, it was 150x growth in just the year 2020 for tokenized Bitcoin. Another catalyst or part of that, like, inflection point in May 2020 is the Compound protocol launched Comp. So there had been a few different liquidity mining programs previous to this. SNX is one of them. What would happen is you would earn SNX weekly through an airdrop for providing liquidity for synthetic Ether and ETH in Uniswap. So that to me, you know, it was a mind-blowing sort of thing that I could get paid to provide liquidity, and that it happened so frictionlessly. I just do my thing and then receive my payment in my wallet. Compound sort of brought this more to the mainstream of the community. Everyone had been watching Compound. They had, they had grown over hundreds of millions in liquidity and quickly launched to 1 billion shortly, like, after this. And so that these big numbers, the reason I point them out is they look small now looking backwards, but these big numbers, and this will continue to happen in the future, they get everyone's attention, and they tend to hook a number of us. And I would never tell anyone that I don't use these numbers necessarily to make investment decisions, but when we talk with the community outside of DeFi, it matters, these big numbers. We shouldn't dismiss them as like, oh, we're potentially entering a bubble. The history of crypto is very volatile. And so TVL has mirrored that sort of volatility in prices. And you can see that. So May 2020, after that comp launch, by September 2020, after we experienced what was now called the DeFi summer, where we had the Urine protocol officially launch with a token, and the Curve protocol also officially launched their token, which was the dominant stablecoin AMM at the time. Suddenly, we're at numbers that, like, it's impossible to unsee. There was a lot of talk in early 2020 that we were in a bubble with DeFi, and by the end of 2020, I think we hit around 25 billion in December. So, and then the few other things I just wanted to highlight. I'm going to talk less about this today, but I believe that NFTs fall under the grander umbrella of what is DeFi. Sometimes we separate the communities, and I think there's real opportunity then to build DeFi applications, but make use of NFTs, or vice versa. And some of those crazy highlights, talking points were when the artist Beeple sold an NFT for 69 million in March 2021. And then more recently, OpenSea hit 1.5 billion in trading volume over the course of 30 days. Anyways, these are some of the major highlights that I see looking backwards. I'm going to pause here a moment. Do you have any questions just about this abbreviated history, or any sort of like takeaways from it?
Yeah, real quick, why did you just mentioned that you took some of your Bitcoin and like wrapped them in Ethereum or tokenized them in Ethereum? Just curious why you did that.
Oh yeah, and yeah, I think this goes to like the profile of users today in DeFi. I DeFi taught me as someone coming from I came from a home that was very financially illiterate. You know, my parents at best have had a savings account. I was taught very little about money other than like pay off your debts. But there's no idea around, there was no teaching around like how to make your capital productive, how to like put your money to work. Very little talk ever about inflation. I had no idea what it was. DeFi really took me down that rabbit hole. And so by the time we were in May 2020, I mean, I had tried, token sets, synthetics, Maker, um, gosh, I'm trying to remember some of the others at the time. I was using Xerion, I remember, to manage my portfolio. Zapper was just about to be born, and the idea that my Bitcoin was just sitting there, not being used, it drove me nuts. I was like, why would I continue to sit on this? It was a small amount. I only got into the space in fall 2017, and I was dollar cost averaging in, but that to me is like that's the itch that can never be satisfied now with the community today. There's a mindset of all of my money should be productive, which I'm actually not arguing that that's correct, just because there's a lot of risk that people are taking at times, and not considering that they should be holding maybe a portion of their portfolio in cold storage versus risking it all in smart contracts. But yeah, that's my best summary of that. So, any other questions here about history of DeFi according to me, which I'm sure if you screenshot this and share this on Twitter, which you should if you want. I can't imagine all the feedback I will get on it. Nothing?
I have
Okay,
a broader
cool.
question
Oh yeah.
about the history. Could you just kind of tell us about so there's like the big blog post that bull markets, bear development. Could you kind of tell us about like what it was like to see people build when crypto was like kind of like out of a bubble and people were thinking it was going to die, and maybe comment on like what you think's happening with building now with like the bull market being crazy?
Yeah. So there is a sentiment shift around, I would say mainly the fall 2019. There was, everybody had concerns about, okay, like we all got a little bit ahead of ourselves. Everyone is clearly a little more excited about like what's possible, to build on Ethereum, more generally Web3. And I think in the fall, like I at the time, I still like I look back at that, and I remember just I went from what do I want to say, like not embarrassed, but maybe less confident to say, hey, look at all the cool shit we're building on Ethereum. That fall 2019, I was suddenly realizing I can earn interest on my digital dollars with DAI. I can play the lossless lottery with Pull Together. And I would say that sort of sentiment spread throughout the community, where it was like, hey, we have product market fit. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it anymore. We have finally discovered like some killer product market fit. People like to make money with their money. We can do this. This thing actually, this works. Like we're seeing the numbers go up and to the right on every DeFi application at the time. So that was it. Just it's the reminder of how reflexive our community is. We're quick to to denounce though the non-believers that like you're an idiot, for not realizing that like this is the future. But then you also have folks that can turn very bearish. when we were living through all of this, though, of course, like there was an ability, I think, for more to be able to focus on building. I think we've recovered from the summer of 2020. That was one time where I've looked around and felt like it seems like everyone is less focused suddenly on building, other than a few of the bigger name protocols. And we had the markets got a little bit bearish in September, October, November 2020, and that seemed to give everyone, I think, a chance to sort of like refocus and think about what are the takeaways from the summer. People love to earn governance tokens. Does that mean that governance tokens are just, like a Ponzi to get people involved in DeFi? No, but these are this is an early demonstration of how to distribute a token. And what we need to focus on now is how do we create liquidity mining that incentivizes long-term holders to participate? And I would argue there's been a lot of iterations over the past year using lockups with different farming rewards, just requiring that you take some sort of a slashing or exit fee when leaving a farm to prevent people from just jumping into pools, farming, and dumping those tokens. Carlos, any other follow-up to that? Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think the product market fit is exactly what I was kind of hearing. Because I remember the ICO boom, everyone was promising the world, and now we have products that actually do what they say they're going to do.
That's it. That's actually, that brings up another point, is if you go back to 2019, 2020, if you were admitting to friends or peers, family, that you had, let's say, 50% of your net wealth in DeFi, that you were actively depositing it into smart contracts, across all these different applications. I mean, it really sounded bold, almost to a point of like, wow, like that sound, it's risky. And by 2020, end of 2020, you suddenly have this whole community emerge of those that have just completely left behind traditional finance. I would count myself as an early one to make this case, because I looked at my money in what little money I had in legacy finance, and I was like, wow, like none of this is productive. Everything requires me to jump through hoops to make small amounts of yield. If I can use DeFi, and if I can earn sizable yield that allows me to still insure it. So summer of 2019, Nexus Mutual also launched. And by summer of 2020, I'd have to go back at how much active cover there was, but I want to say we were around hundreds of millions in active DeFi cover, or let's just call it insurance. So many of us now are thinking, hey, I can earn 20% in a stablecoin pool with, let's say, Curve, but I can insure it for 2.6%. And so these bits of utility just open the floodgates for the average user. And obviously at this point, we have so many opportunities here on Ethereum. So this mainly reflects Ethereum. We're looking at like around 85 billion. I mean, if you go back here, this is around summer of 2020 was around 500 million. And then February 2020, it was 1 billion. We dropped under 500 million on March 12th, 2020, which is when like kind of all the global markets crashed from COVID. But I mean, it's a rare thing to feel that something that the greater masses do not understand yet. I think like the whole crypto community feels like they've had that light bulb moment, but this is something I still think that people underestimate today. Like they look at where DeFi has grown, and it's still a very niche community. There's I think over 2 million active wallets just on Ethereum. And then we've grown obviously in terms of what I would call multi-chain DeFi. Basically, without going into the weeds of whether like a blockchain is decentralized enough, there are other blockchains that are hosting and growing DeFi, and they've been growing it very rapidly. The majority, which by the way, this I wouldn't compare this to this in terms of like Ethereum versus Ethereum plus everything else. There's quite a bit on DeFi Llama that isn't also on DeFi Pulse. But anyways, long story short, Ethereum is the dominant landmass, and then we're seeing I don't want to call them just copy paste, but that is what in many cases, especially with EVM compatible chains like a Polygon that's had significant growth, BSC, they're basically seeing like money Legos or building blocks on Ethereum. That code is being copied over or iterated on, and it works. People are using a different blockchain. Main difference though I would call out there is I think a lot of DeFi users, I'll say the ones that have been around longer, recognize the difference in security, and so Ethereum just continues to see this sort of parabolic growth. While we are seeing like sub 10 billion in total value locked on other chains. And then there's some that are not EVM compatible, like Terra has seen quite a bit of adoption. They've only got 6 applications though. And I want to say on Ethereum, we've easily got 100 plus that are, hosting, at least a few million in total value locked. And Solana, of course, has been another one. One last thing here to note in terms of like these like highlights of the big numbers over the past few years, I bring it back to this tokenized Bitcoin, and there's all sorts of different versions of tokenized Bitcoin on Ethereum and now other blockchains. It goes to an insatiable demand for people to earn yield. If you know that you're holding a store of value like Bitcoin, which I personally still do hold Bitcoin despite some of my criticisms of the community, when I'm holding that Bitcoin, I would like to earn more of it. Now, there's lots of custodial services still available, like BlockFi is one of the largest centralized lenders, but I never know what happens to my Bitcoin when it goes into BlockFi. Once it's there, I have no idea if they're doing under collateral, if they've got less collateral on hand than what they owe everyone. I do know that they do over collateralized lending for those that want to open a loan. But long story short, to me, it's a slight pivot on traditional finance that we're supposed to be improving upon. What's the point of having a decentralized, self-sovereign, censorship-resistant, digitally scarce asset if you give it up to someone else and now you have an IOU? You've basically just recreated some of the challenges of traditional finance. So that Ren bridge, and now there are tons of other interoperable bridges to move money between different chains, especially Bitcoin. I mean, this is a turning point. This is why so much value has been locked up on Ethereum. Okay, I want to highlight some of the major narratives, and I really would like to actually, let me just double check what time it is. Okay, I want to show you some applications too. So just very quickly, stable coins, you probably all know, again, it's in most cases it's pegged to $1. The major hang up is it decentralized or centralized, or does it have risks of collateralizing centralized collateral? Yeah. So we've got DAI, for example. DAI was always like I think the poster child of the decentralized stablecoin. But because of the fact that there's so much USDC that's backing it, that has definitely, I think, hurt the narrative for DAI and questionably opened up opportunities for others to create new stable coins. This is not a space personally I would want to be building in. It seems like you're fighting like 800-pound gorillas in the room with DAI, and especially USDC and Tether. And then SUSD here, I pointed out, or Ray is another good example where all of the collateral is, something like an Ether, or in the case of synthetics, it's all SNX. So that sort of like purity around the collateral that backs a stable coin is, I think, very well received by the community. We've also got obviously multiple automated market makers. I mean, what's the easiest story to tell someone about why they can and should use DeFi? You can trade any token you want. You don't have to wait for a centralized exchange to list it. And so, Uniswap, SushiSwap, and Bancor have been the dominant, Balancer as well. A few others I'm missing here, but these have been the dominant exchanges the last few years. Uniswap being clearly number one by trade volume, but SushiSwap close behind it. We talked quite a bit about lending and borrowing. I think what's interesting about this is that these larger money markets in DeFi, they've been so dominant. I just haven't seen as many founders willing to try to create a competitor to these versus what already exists here. And obviously Aave and Compound being significantly larger than the other two, Cream being much larger than BZX. One of the interesting narratives though around money markets and DeFi is, we're obviously today we're all focused here on Ethereum, but there seems to be a strategy now that you must deploy liquidity across multiple chains or L2 solutions on Ethereum. True L2, like we have ZK Porter that's coming this fall from the ZK Sync team. We've got Optimism already live and early on in deploying new applications, Arbitrum. I think probably if there's one takeaway from today, I would just encourage you to, if you're going to build on Ethereum, do everything you can to learn about Optimism, Arbitrum, this future ZK Porter. I'm probably missing another one here, but do everything you can to understand the opportunities there to start to build on L2, because I think it's not the future anymore. It's just around the corner. I think there's just huge, there's going to be a huge shift all at once where suddenly no one's transacting on L1 anymore. There are another few items here we covered. Tokenized Bitcoin, don't need to say anything more about that. Anything that abstracts away the complexity of having to move your money and think up, strategies about how to earn yield. So I'm calling this structured product / automation. These are products that whether they're getting lots of hype in terms of news, Yearn has been somewhat, I would say, quiet over the last several months, but they just continue to have users who are, putting their assets to work. They are using Yearn to basically just deposit a token and earn yield on that. And some of these have some really complex strategies. The thing that we're missing here is this has been limited in terms of these automated yield farms on something like Yearn or Harvest, or there's options selling strategies through Ribbon. These are existing today on Ethereum L1. I'm very excited for these to be deployed to, L2s on Ethereum. That, suddenly you can compound returns like crazy. I've seen this on, I've used Solana less, but having tried it, there are some copy pastes of Yearn, and they're able to just compound returns like crazy every few hours because gas costs pennies. And so this is the thing that's right around the corner for Ethereum, is that you have L2s that will allow us to start to increase yield by just doing some simple compounding strategy. We've also got derivatives, of course. There's larger perpetuals markets like DYDX. Main point here, main like takeaway with derivatives in DeFi is I would say that you have a community of users who are normally long, especially on Ethereum, you're long ETH. So anything you can do to build and allow them to continue to stay long ETH without triggering a taxable event, taxable being like having to trade or swap tokens, that's huge. You know, that's the goal of so many is to, and you know, if we acknowledge the fact that there are, you know, there are whales that take up quite a bit of the total value locked in DeFi, those entities are going to quickly adopt anything like a perpetuals market that allows them to continue to earn. Okay, and then lastly here is, so over the summer, we've seen these projects where someone basically codes in a design and you can mint as many of these unique NFTs as you want using Ethereum or another blockchain. And so this is potentially going to lead to some sort of bubble bursting. But my takeaway from this has been that whether or not like we see like a drawdown in activity in NFTs, these are communities that are collectors. So collectors like to collect, they don't like to sell. And so this is a whole nother space that's very interesting to build on Ethereum. There is my experience so far, having tried to like understand the burgeoning NFT communities on some other blockchains. This is one of the most unique parts of Ethereum. Like there's just no NFT community like it. And then that leads us into folks that are fascinated by building digital communities in places like Decentralized or Somnium and so on. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Any questions about some of the DeFi narratives that I highlighted? All right, cool. And gosh, I want to, you know what, let me just quickly show you before I talk about, I feel like we kind of covered what's missing here. Actually, okay, this is quick because then I want to show you some DeFi applications live. One thing that's been very noticeable is just that we're very dependent on desktop. And I know that like my friends that, you know, live in China and other parts of Asia talk about how, you know, basically everybody, of course, wants to use DeFi and have a mobile experience. So that's, I think, just low-hanging fruit, just to call that out, that like we're still struggling with DeFi on a mobile UX. Another really interesting opportunity, I would encourage you check out Orion.money. So this is technically a Terra project, but it's not. It's a cross-chain project where you are able to deposit one of like 6 or 7 stable coins. Actually, I should pull this up. Hold on. Let me just show you this. This is such an interesting, it kind of highlights the DeFi experience of today, where we're wanting to earn that yield on whatever assets we hold. Stable coins being one of the most popular. Let me just make sure this is all plugged in. Yep, here we go. Share my screen. Okay, so if you look here, it's like, okay, I can go in and I can deposit one of these stable coins or algorithmic stable coin there. And, you know, really simple experience, you know, whatever, specify how much I want to put in, and then I'm ultimately going to have to approve spending it and then deposit it. What's special about this is under the hood, there is a protocol on Terra that pays, it's not a fixed rate, but let's just call it a stable rate. It pays about 19.5 to 20% interest. And so this is the first example I've seen where a team said, let's allow everyone to stay on Ethereum and be able to earn these interest rates on another blockchain, in this case, Terra. So first time I've ever seen anything like this. And I think like there's definitely opportunity here in the future to say, hey, would you prefer to keep your assets on Ethereum, or at least in this case, to have to not set up a new wallet? If you are, you'll notice they're taking a cut of nearly 3.5%. And I guess some of these are going to rise in the future based on how much of their native token Orion that you deposit. But anyways, I think this is a really cool example of like where we're headed with cross-chain DeFi, where we acknowledge that the largest user base is on Ethereum. I think we're underestimating what L2 is going to do for Ethereum in terms of attracting that many more users who might have tried another chain that's less secure but costs less to transact. Like this is a very sort of promising thing for the growth of DeFi in general. Okay, one last thing here. We already talked about the growth of NFTs. I think that the past year, we've had Index Co-op. We've had all sorts of products emerge that cater to those that are in a bull market. And the reality is that like we might not be in a bull market forever. we won't be in a bull market. And I don't know what that looks like for DeFi, but I know a few of the things that I'm betting on is money at worst exits to stable coins, but it's staying on chain. And so if you're seeing more capital accrue to being on chain, in this case, Ethereum, you're going to still have a thirst for earning yield. And so these indexes were really popular the last year. The DeFi Pulse Index was one of the most liquid ones. It's got 206 million as a market cap now. There's all sorts of other interesting ones here by index, like the Metaverse Index and so on. But the point is there's huge opportunity now to build tools that'll help you to hedge, or what I was calling structured products that basically would work in a down market. So something that allows you to do a basis trade, like if you can earn that funding rate by just depositing money, that opens up the door for so many to participate. Many average DeFi users aren't going to execute a basis trade, but like if you can do that with the click of a button, like you can with strategies on Yearn, that's exciting. That's a whole nother arena that should thrive within DeFi. Okay, I was gonna jump into some applications here, just some examples on like Zapper, but really I should pause here and let's see if there's any questions. Oh, there we go, Bruce.
Yeah. Hi. This is really interesting. So I have been trying different kind of yield tools as well. Is that similar to kind of traditional DeFi? If the yield is too good to be true, it could be a scam. Because I think now, kind of after the craziness of the last 6 or 12 months, I think the kind of more reputable kind of yields kind of coming down more to earth, like between 5% to 15%. But we still sometimes see like a crazy yield. So what's your take on that? Because there are always new products coming on market.
Yeah, so at this point, I'm really careful as a user. So I think this is worth pointing out to understand the user profile. There's those of us who I'm probably more conservative despite all the stuff I've tried. Like I really think about sizing the position that I'm willing to put into a new yield farm, because my assumption is that there could be some exploit there and that I could lose all of my money. But one of the things that's allowed me to risk more has been DeFi insurance through something like a Nexus Mutual. So I've put in a lot more money into, let's say, a protocol like Aave, because I know that I can sleep at night, that I have a dependable payout through Nexus, despite however much money I might put into that. So, and then in terms of is it too good to be true? It depends on your benchmark. I think like you pointed out, 5 to 15%, is it's a killer return compared to the traditional world. But, like you see triple digit yield available all the time. I think the thing to point out is in most cases, it's a fleeting moment of an opportunity. So you look at a new yield farm that launches, and the APY is correct. Maybe it's like 500%, but it's because no one has deposited much liquidity. So for what it's worth, me as a user, I am one who likes to wait a few days because I've seen something and said, wow, I would love to earn that. It looks like the team is a team that's at least enough to risk some money in it. Like they look, whatever, they've got backing from some folks that I respect. But then, I see the yield drop from 100% on Ether to, let's say, 10%. And I say, well, 10% on Ether is wonderful, but I could get that elsewhere. Also, one last thing on that. I think if anyone who builds an application protocol here, one of the things that we try to work with teams on through Fourth Revolution Capital is we try to think about incentives programs that will attract those who want to earn the token and stay with us long term. Like I don't farm anything. I don't yield farm or liquidity mine unless it's a token that I think is worth holding long term. So I basically use it as a way to not have to continually put in new capital into new tokens. I put my capital to work, my liquidity to work, and I earn that. And then I think I'm more content to sit on that position because I earned it through something like interest or liquidity mining rewards. Julian, sorry, you had a question? Or was it Julian or there's someone else here whose name?
I did have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Julian.
There was this like really revealing moment today where we were going to try to do, we did do a little bit of deposit your token for a yield. And, there was a moment of shock for a lot of people when they saw how high the Ethereum transaction fees were. I guess my question is just one, do you see that as like a big threat or blocker for the future? And two, this is very much right on your personal experience. Like, is there a threshold where you're like, okay, if it's over $500 or $1,000, I'm willing to pay this fee. If it's not, then I just don't even consider. Like, how do you make that judgment yourself?
Yeah, that's a great point. So obviously, I'd tell anyone, like, check out Zapper when you get a chance. Like, obviously, you can connect your wallet and track your portfolio. It does a great job, though, of reducing the fees that you pay. Now, today's a pretty rough day. It's 93 Gwei. I mean, and like if we go to gasnow.org, which is actually what feeds into Zapper there. I mean, if you look at the chart here, so this is nice. It shows you day by day, hour by hour. You can see like prices went through the roof the last 48 hours here. Really, we had been enjoying, whether you're in the 20s, even 30s here, 30, 40 Gwei. It's still quite a bit to transact. This to me is more of a reminder that like we have all this usage and it's just not that easy to enable anyone to transact at some of these gas prices. And so this is my urgency around like, learn everything you can about layer twos. Think to potentially deploy on layer two. There's even, there's opportunities here like Diversify, which is built with Starkware there we go. There's the launch market. If you end up launching a token in the future, you can launch on L2 through something like Diversify. This is actually, this is the only place I know of that you can now launch on L2. I think it's important as builders that you don't, you find a way to quickly adopt L2 on Ethereum, which again is really probably 6 months from now. I mean, my hope is that it's more unusual for someone that's a new user to transact on L1. So yeah, I think like the long and short is I'm trying to say that like help is right around the corner. We've got this problem where it's like we've got a club or restaurant that has a line out the door. and I personally would rather have a line out the door than have users that are loyal, that have been around for years, than consider that I can recreate this magic elsewhere. And that being said, also I'm very pro multi-chain DeFi. I just think it makes almost zero sense for anyone to not be launching on Ethereum or to not be building to launch on Ethereum and some other chain simultaneously.
Joshua?
Awesome. I'll make it quick. So earlier, whenever you showed the timeline, that was super helpful. I was wondering if you've ever made any content that's maybe like a similar dynamic, except with yields or like ROIs. Like, in other words, like at one end you have like compound and lending, and it's very low ROI but also very low risk, and it talks about why. And then on the very opposite end you have like extremely large yields, but then also with like, I guess I'm kind of looking for like a taxonomy of like risk versus reward along a spectrum.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, this obviously isn't like a perfect rule of thumb, but I do depend on looking at total value locked to say, okay, this doesn't mean that I can just put my money into that protocol and trust it, but I look at longevity because it means more battle tested code over time, like anything that has survived an exploit too, like that can potentially be reframed as a strength, like that we've survived this, and like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But yeah, I do tend to look here. Probably easiest way is go to Nexus Mutual .io. Consider this. This is a DAO that is, it's insurance that's built with smart contracts on Ethereum. This is a whole community that's fixated on providing insurance, but being able to earn yield. The point is to not have exploits happen. So, if I end up going to, let me just, because we'll need to wrap up here on this. Here we go. Sorry, let me reshare my screen. I tend to use this as another gauge. Like, I'm very active in this community, so I know how much time and due diligence goes into these different protocols. But if it's covered by Nexus Mutual, if it's, you can see the yearly cost, it goes as low as 2.6%. The more tokens that people stake against it, the lower the cost goes. So I know that if people are staking less against that, like Visor Finance, this to me tells me that the community is less confident in Visor Finance, and they did experience a hack quite a while ago. So that could be it. But I look at anything here at 2.6%. I mean, Alchemix had their problems. You can see it's reflected from a community that fixates on how can we underwrite the risk of using DeFi. So consider using this, but great idea for maybe like a future video, Josh.
Thank you.
Preeti, I've kept you over. I can let you guys go here.
No, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Honestly, you covered everything I was hoping you'd cover. So thank you so much for coming and sharing all your knowledge and insight. And all your YouTube videos are also really awesome. So thanks for all the education.
Absolutely. Yeah. If anyone, God, I left this out. If you go to DeFiDad.com, that's just my YouTube. That's got lots of videos there. Preeti shared a bunch of, videos and links already that are helpful. And then, just a reminder, you can DM me at DeFi_dad on Twitter. Love to help, especially if you're, building a protocol after this boot camp. And also check out fourthrevolution.capital. If it's just contact at fourthrevolution.capital, that'll get to me as well. So honestly, I've met with so many founders and just provided feedback. It's not like, I really talk about things that 90% of the time I have absolutely no sort of investment in. I really believe that like a rising tide lifts all boats in DeFi. So we got to help each other out.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Travis.
Thanks, Preeti.
All
Bye,
right.
everyone. Great to meet you.